Everyone says they want to be strong, but few understand what true strength looks like. It's not loud, it's not reckless, it's not physical. Real strength, the kind that terrifies people, is silent, disciplined, unshakable, and it begins in the mind. Niccolò Machiavelli knew this. He saw how men rose to power, not through brute force, but through mental mastery. He understood that the most dangerous man is not the one who shouts, but the one who never flinches. The one who can stay calm in chaos, who can think clearly when everyone else is drowning in emotion. That man doesn't need to fight. His presence alone shifts the balance of power. This kind of mind is not born. It is built, brick by brick, cut by cut, through choices others refuse to make. And it is built in silence while others are still making noise. We are taught to be reactive, to express every emotion, to explain every move. But Machiavelli would say that's not strength. That's exposure. That's giving your opponents the blueprint to your soul. A strong mind never does that. It controls the reaction. It controls the image. It controls the outcome. Because the stronger your mind, the less predictable you become. And the less predictable you are, the harder it is to be controlled. So how do you build a mind that terrifies? First, by mastering restraint. The mind that reacts to everything, criticism, praise, conflict, emotion, is a mind that is still enslaved. But the one that watches, calculates, waits, that mind is already free. Machiavelli would call this the lion's patience and the fox's cunning, not just knowing when to strike, but knowing when to stay still. You see this in leaders. The real ones don't respond to every insult. They don't explain every move. They let their silence do the talking. And because they don't flinch, they terrify those who live in fear of being misunderstood. That's your first step. Stop reacting. Let people misjudge you. Let them guess. Let them talk. Every time you stay quiet, you're adding a new layer to the fortress of your mind. Second, build discipline. Not the kind that you post online. Not the kind you talk about. The kind that no one sees. Waking up early. Training when you don't feel like it. Reading when you're exhausted. Practicing control when you want to explode. That's where strength is forged. Not in front of an audience, but in solitude. Machiavelli understood this principle well. Appearance is power, but reality sustains it. You must look calm, but you must also be calm. You must appear strong, but more importantly, you must become strong. And that happens in private, where no one is watching, where no one claps. Third, kill the need for approval. The unbreakable mind does not need validation. It does not need to be understood. It does not chase applause. Because the second you start needing people's opinions to feel strong, you've already given away your strength. And that's what terrifies people most. Someone who no longer depends on their reactions. A mind that doesn't seek to impress, but to impose. A mind that doesn't explain itself, but executes in silence. A mind that doesn't show off, but shows up, ruthlessly, consistently, without emotion clouding its judgment. You cannot build this mind if you are still trying to be loved by everyone. You must be willing to be alone, to be misread, to be called cold, harsh, detached. Let them say what they want. You're not here to be soft. You're here to be sovereign, because Machiavelli saw it clearly. The masses follow those they cannot predict. They obey those they cannot manipulate. They fear those they cannot fully understand. And to create that fear, not through cruelty, but through command, you must master the war within. You must become the kind of person who walks into a room and doesn't need to speak to be felt, who doesn't need to react to make an impact, who doesn't need attention to assert dominance. That kind of mind isn't born in comfort. It's forged in fire. The fire of rejection, the fire of solitude, the fire of choosing what's difficult, while others choose what's easy. And when you've endured that enough times, When your actions are no longer dictated by impulse, insecurity, or image, you become untouchable. You become feared, not for what you do, but for what you don't need to do. You don't need to fight. You don't need to shout. You don't need to prove anything, because you've already won within. That's what Machiavelli meant by power. Not position, not popularity, but inner control. The kind that makes others hesitate, that silences rooms, that terrifies weak minds. The moment they realize you don't need them, you've built a mind they can't move, a fortress no one sees until it's too late. The man with the strongest mind is not the loudest. He is the hardest to disturb. That's what makes him dangerous. You can insult him. He won't flinch. You can doubt him. He won't explain. You can lie about him. He won't defend. Because he knows that silence in the face of noise is power, and that power, once mastered internally, controls everything externally. Machiavelli would tell you control yourself first, and others will follow. Lose control of your mind, and you give them permission to control you. That's why most people never rise. Their minds are too reactive, too emotional, too fragile. They chase validation. They fear rejection. They get offended by words, crushed by opinions, and paralyzed by fear of failure. You cannot build an unbreakable mind while being a slave to what others think. The strongest minds belong to those who have chosen detachment, not from the world, but from the need to be comforted by it. They don't need applause. They don't need agreement. They don't need sympathy. Their clarity comes from discipline, not dopamine. And that clarity terrifies people because it cannot be bought. It cannot be swayed. It cannot be manipulated. That is step 4, emotional detachment. When others attack you, observe. When chaos rises, remain still. When emotions surge, don't respond. Why? Because the second you lose control, you lose authority. Machiavelli taught that rulers who are loved are vulnerable, but rulers who are respected are secure. Respect comes from control, not just of others, but of the self. Think of the mind like a battlefield. The enemy isn't just external pressure, it's internal noise, doubt, insecurity, impulse, weakness. The untrained mind surrenders to them, but the disciplined mind watches them pass. It chooses thought over feeling, delay over impulse, stillness over panic. You want to be unbreakable? Start there. 5th, you must train in discomfort. No fortress is tested in sunshine. It is built in storms. You don't know if your mind is strong until everything goes wrong, until the plan collapses, the people leave, the failure hits. That's where you find out what you're made of. Machiavelli respected those who could endure isolation, betrayal, and chaos without collapsing inward. Because most collapse, they beg for comfort. They retreat to old habits. They abandon their standards. But the one with the unbreakable mind stays the course. He adapts, but he does not lower his standards. He adjusts, but he does not lose his identity. He bends, but never breaks. And in that posture, he gains power, because others, watching from the sidelines, begin to fear what they do not understand. How he keeps going when others fold. How he speaks without emotion, moves without hesitation, wins without noise. That fear turns into influence, and that influence becomes control, not of others, but of outcome. You don't have to dominate people to control outcomes. You only have to master what most can't, your own mind. Now we reach the 6th rule. Become strategically unpredictable. Predictability is comfort for others. It allows them to plan against you, mock you, manipulate you. But when you are unreadable, you become untouchable. Not because you hide, but because you never repeat your patterns. Speak less, move differently, break your routines, make your next step invisible. This is what Machiavelli meant when he wrote that a prince must learn how not to be good when the situation demands it. Not because goodness is wrong, but because rigidity is weakness. An unbreakable mind must be fluid, calm but adaptable, silent but dangerous, predictable, only when it serves the objective. And that's the key word, objective. The weak mind speaks to be heard. The strong mind speaks to create movement. The weak mind reacts to emotions. The strong mind calculates before responding. The weak mind follows impulse. The strong mind moves by intention. This is your path now. The construction of a fortress no one sees but everyone feels. A presence that shakes rooms without speaking. A power that makes people uncomfortable. Not because you attack, but because you do not need. You don't need approval. You don't need revenge. You don't need noise. Because the moment you built an unshakable mind, you exited the game they're all still playing. You play a different game now. One where restraint is strength, precision is power, and silence is strategy. There comes a moment when you realize you've outgrown the game. Not because you're better than anyone else, but because you've stopped needing what they're still chasing. Attention, recognition, validation. These are the currencies of the weak mind, but the strong mind, the unbreakable one, trades in something else entirely. Control. Control of self. Control of outcomes. Control of perception. That's where the true game begins. Machiavelli knew this. He wrote not for the crowd, but for the ruler. Not for the man who needed to be seen, but for the man who shaped what others saw. That is the mind you must now build. One that doesn't respond to the world. It shapes it. And to do that, you must master the seventh law. Create distance. Not physical distance, psychological distance. The unbreakable mind never allows others to feel too close. Not because it fears intimacy, but because it knows the cost of access. Every person who enters your mental space can influence it. Every conversation, every opinion, every subtle expectation, they all begin to rewire your direction. You must remain sovereign. The fortress is not open to all. The inner room is reserved for clarity, discipline, and truth. If too many people live in your mind, you are no longer the ruler. You are the host. That is not power. That is servitude. People fear what they cannot reach, and they respect what they cannot sway. That is why leaders who maintain calm, quiet distance are so compelling. They are not rude, they are not cold, but they are inaccessible at the level where most people try to connect. Emotionally, impulsively, socially. Machiavelli called it the aura of command. Not built by words, but by walls. Not in hostility, but in scarcity. When your time, your energy, and your attention become rare, they become valuable. Guard them. This leads to the eighth law: refuse to be baited. Weak minds are lured into distraction, into arguments, into emotional traps, into games that waste time and exhaust energy. But the strong mind does not take the bait. It sees the trap and steps around it, not out of fear, but out of discipline. Because when you engage with fools, you become part of their theater. When you argue with noise, you validate it. When you fight every insult, you become predictable. The unbreakable mind is not reactive. It is selective. It asks, will this make me stronger? Will this serve the mission? Will this sharpen my edge? If not, it moves on. Quietly, efficiently, without hesitation. And this unnerves people, because they can't provoke you. They can't disturb you. They can't drag you down into their chaos. That control becomes fearsome, not violent, not arrogant, just undeniable. It's why so many people will try to test you once you begin this path. Not because they hate you, but because your stillness exposes their instability. Your focus threatens their excuses. Your silence reveals their noise. Do not break. Stay the course. Law 9. Develop inner solitude. The strong mind does not need constant companionship. It walks alone by design, not because it rejects others, but because it has learned to think clearly in silence. This is where strategy lives. This is where clarity sharpens. In solitude, away from distraction, away from validation, the mind becomes a weapon. Machiavelli understood that great rulers practiced solitude. They withdrew not to hide but to plan, to observe, to imagine futures before others even saw the present. This is where your strength deepens. Practice solitude, not loneliness. Solitude. That is where the noise of the world fades, and the signal of your mission becomes deafening. And now the 10th law, see through everything. Believe in almost nothing. The unbreakable mind is not cynical, but it is never naive. It listens to words, but watches behavior. It sees through compliments, through drama, through promises, not because it wants to mistrust, but because it refuses to be caught sleeping. Trust must be earned, not given, and even then never blindly, because every man has a motive, every move hides a message, and unless your mind is trained to detect it, you will become a pawn in someone else's plan. So sharpen your perception, train your attention, study patterns, observe quietly, and most importantly, stay calm while others reveal themselves, because they always do. Give people space, and they will tell you who they are. Give them comfort, and they will show you their intentions. Give them time and their mask will slip. And when it does, you won't need to confront. You won't need to fight. You will simply adjust your strategy. No anger, no reaction, just precision. This is what terrifies people most about the unbreakable mind. It does not explode. It does not panic. It does not explain. It adjusts. And because it adjusts, faster than others collapse, it always wins. You cannot be broken if no one knows where to press. That is the power of the unbreakable mind. It hides its levers. It shows no wounds. It gives no reaction. And in doing so, it terrifies, because people don't fear the aggressive. They fear the unreadable, the calm, the composed, the man who sees everything and says nothing. Machiavelli understood that fear, true fear, doesn't come from threats. It comes from uncertainty, from mystery, from silence. You cannot attack what you cannot define. You cannot manipulate what you cannot predict. That is why the man with the strong mind is not feared for what he says, but for what he might be capable of. This leads to the 11th law. Remove all neediness from your mind. Neediness is mental exposure. If you need attention, they can starve you. If you need praise, they can withhold it. If you need acceptance, they can reject you. And the moment they realize you need something from them, they own you. You want power. Cut every mental tether that makes your strength dependent on their response. People are terrified of those who need nothing, because they can't be bribed, they can't be shamed, they can't be baited. That's what makes you dangerous. Not your words, not your muscles, but your lack of dependence. You are not cold, you are complete. Now Law 12, master the power of delay. Most people are slaves to urgency. They feel something, they say it, they want something, they act, they fear something, they flee. The strong mind doesn't move on impulse. It moves by design, slowly, if needed, ruthlessly, when ready. Machiavelli would call this the lion's patience, the fox's timing, the ability to wait, not out of fear but calculation, because a premature move is just a visible mistake, but a delayed strike, that's power sharpened. People fear what waits. They fear the man who doesn't rush to respond, because in his delay, they feel pressure, doubt, weakness. While he stays calm, they unravel. That's the weapon. That's the game. Delay isn't weakness. It's weight. Every second you don't speak, your presence grows. Every time you don't respond, their uncertainty multiplies. And when you finally move, they can't stop it. Law 13. Never argue with fools. The strong mind never fights for attention. It never battles noise. It never tries to win a crowd, because arguing with fools lowers you to their level, and they will beat you with experience. Let them bark. Let them perform. You do not need to participate. The moment you argue to prove yourself, you've already conceded your power. Silence wins. Stillness wins. Dismissal wins. Machiavelli would say, Never wrestle pigs. You both get dirty, and the pig enjoys it. A fool wants your energy. Don't give it. A fool wants your reaction. Don't give it. A fool wants your validation. By trying to provoke you, let them scream. You stay silent. You stay in control. And when others see you unbothered, they realize who truly leads the room. Law 14. Do not apologize for your evolution. As your mind strengthens, you will become harder to read, colder, sharper, more disciplined. People will accuse you of changing. They're right. You've changed. You've upgraded. You've left behind the soft version of yourself who needed permission to grow. Let them be uncomfortable. Your evolution is not for their comfort. It's for your survival. Strong minds are not liked by everyone. They are followed by the few and feared by the many. That's the cost, and you must stop apologizing for it. You must stop softening your truth to keep others calm. You must stop bending just to be included. Machiavelli would tell you, if you wish to be safe, obey. If you wish to rule, be ready to be alone. You are not here to please. You are here to prevail. And the final law in this section: know when to vanish. Power is not in presence. It's in the ability to disappear and still be remembered. The unbreakable mind is not afraid to step away, to go silent, to retreat, not as surrender but as preparation. When you vanish, you create space, space for curiosity, space for tension, space for others to wonder, where is he? What is he planning? Has he changed? And in that vacuum, your influence grows. Machiavelli understood that the prince who is always visible becomes predictable, but the one who withdraws strategically, he becomes a myth, a force, a legend. So vanish, then return sharper, stronger, more dangerous than before. You want to terrify weak minds? Don't react, don't explain, don't return calls immediately. Don't show up just because they expect it. Make your presence earned, make your silence deafening, and when you reappear, let them feel the difference. This is how you build a mind so strong it disturbs people without ever raising your voice. Strength is not just what you show. It's what you can endure without showing anything at all. That's the final form of the unbreakable mind. Not noise, not reaction, but quiet endurance. The ability to take the hit, absorb the chaos, and keep moving without flinching, without explaining, without asking for sympathy. This is what Machiavelli admired. Not the warrior who shouted, but the ruler who survived. Not the man who fought every battle, but the one who chose which battles to fight and which to let pass in silence. Because that's the ultimate test. When the world misreads you, will you correct them? When they insult you, will you respond? When they doubt you, will you explain? Or will you stay still? The unbreakable mind knows who it is. It does not need to prove it. That brings us to the 15th law. Embrace misinterpretation. Weak minds panic when misunderstood. They rush to clarify. They want to be seen as good, as clear, as reasonable. But Machiavelli would tell you clarity is overrated. In fact, it's often a trap. When people think they know everything about you, they stop respecting you. They feel entitled to your thoughts, your time, your decision. But the man who allows misunderstanding without resistance keeps control. Let them misread your silence as arrogance. Let them call your restraint cold. Let them assume your stillness is weakness. Every false assumption they make is an advantage you hold because you know the truth, and they don't. Law 16. Show results, not reasons. Modern culture worships transparency. Explain your process. Show your progress. Share your journey. But the strongest minds don't share. They build quietly, alone, in private. And when it's time, they don't explain. They demonstrate. You want to terrify someone? Don't talk about what you're working on. Disappear. Evolve. Then return with results. So sharp, no one dares question how you got there. Let others waste their time narrating their intention. You will be too busy becoming undeniable. Law 17. Be loyal to your mission, not their feelings. A weak mind betrays itself to protect others' comfort. It lowers its standards, softens its goals, slows its progress. Why? Because it fears being disliked, being called too intense, too cold, too obsessed. But the strong mind stays loyal to the vision, to the purpose, to the path, even when it offends, even when it isolates, even when it terrifies. Machiavelli would ask, what's more dangerous? A man who betrays others, or a man who betrays himself? You must choose. And if you want to build a mind they fear, you must never betray yourself. Law 18. Outlast them all. Most people aren't defeated. They just quit. They collapse under pressure, under boredom, under doubt. But the strongest minds are built for endurance. You don't need to move the fastest. You don't need to be the loudest. You just need to keep going when others stop. That's what terrifies people most. Not your rise, but your refusal to fall. You take the blows. You watch them celebrate too soon. You smile while they mock. You keep your plans buried while they flaunt theirs. And then one by one, they fade, and you remain. That's power. That's discipline. That's an unbreakable mind. Now here's the truth most won't tell you. Building this kind of mind will cost you. It will cost you approval. It will cost you shallow relationships. It will cost you moments of comfort, of belonging, of praise. But what you gain is worth more. Stillness under pressure, clarity in confusion, control in chaos. You become the one others look to when everything falls apart. Not because you have all the answers, but because you are the only one not shaking. Machiavelli would say, the storm does not destroy the strongest tower. It reveals it. So become the tower. Reinforce it daily, through silence, through solitude, through sharp choices made quietly, through ruthless editing of your own weaknesses. Let them say what they want. Let them hope you break. They don't understand what you've built, because the strongest mind doesn't need to announce itself. It just doesn't move. It doesn't fall, and it doesn't care who's watching. You don't announce an unbreakable mind. You become it, quietly, deliberately, without asking anyone for permission. And by the time they realize what you are, what you've built, it's too late. You're already untouchable. That's the final evolution. A mind that can't be bought, baited, or broken. A mind that walks into any room and shifts the atmosphere. Not through volume, but through presence. A presence formed in solitude, forged through rejection, sharpened by discipline, hardened by truth. Machiavelli would say, to lead without needing followers, to command without demanding, to remain calm in the fire while others beg for water. That is rule, not rank. That is power, not noise. And that kind of power makes people uncomfortable, because they can't read it, they can't move it, they can't tame it. It's why the final law is the simplest and the hardest. Say less, win more. Words are tools. Use them like a blade, not a flood. When you speak too much, you leak power. You reveal fears, you expose thinking, you invite judgment. But when you speak rarely, people lean in, they wait, they listen. And in that silence, your influence multiplies. This is not about muteness, it's about mastery. You say exactly what you mean, nothing more, nothing less. And because your words are rare, they are trusted. Because your reactions are controlled, they are feared. Because your presence is still, it is undeniable. People talk to be understood, you speak to direct. People talk to connect, you speak to control. People talk to feel important. You speak because your silence already proved that you are. So say less, not as a trick, but as a principle. Because every word must serve your outcome. Every sentence must move the needle. If it doesn't belong. That's how a ruler thinks. That's how a strategist moves. That's how a king survives. The men who leave a legacy are not remembered for how loudly they spoke, but for how sharply they moved. For how few words they needed to shift a kingdom, crush an enemy, inspire loyalty or create fear. Be that man, and remember your mind is your empire. And empires are not ruled with emotion. They are ruled with clarity, with edge, with silence that carries weight. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to broadcast your growth. You don't need to warn anyone about your next move. You just move, because by the time they realize what's happened, by the time they feel the silence, you're already beyond reach, already operating on a level where they can't follow. They will call it arrogance, coldness, isolation. Let them. They fear what they can't control, and nothing is harder to control than a man who governs himself. Machiavelli was never afraid of being hated. He was afraid of being ruled by emotions. He saw clearly that power is a mental game, and most people never even enter the arena. But you are different. You are no longer governed by noise. You are no longer trapped by approval. You are no longer waiting to be understood. You are building in silence. You are watching without reacting. You are planning without sharing. You are growing without applause. You are becoming the person they will all pretend they knew. Once you win, but they don't know you now, because you've gone quiet. You've gone inward. You've gone sovereign. And from this point forward, you don't chase attention. You don't chase peace. You are a peace that makes people nervous, a stillness that cannot be explained, a mind so strong it no longer needs to resist, because nothing gets in. You have become the fortress. Let them knock on the walls. You won't answer, because you no longer speak to be heard. You speak to move, and only when it's time. If you've made it this far, it's because part of you is already shifting. Part of you is tired of being predictable, tired of being understood, tired of bending to fit a world that fears strength and worships weakness. And now you face a question. Are you willing to become untouchable? Are you ready to walk the path where fewer words bring more impact, where silence becomes your armor, and where the price of peace is power? Tell me in the comments. Are you ready to be feared because you no longer flinch? If this message reached you, if it spoke the truth you've been waiting to hear, write in the comments, I have no master. Let's see how many here are ready to rule, not react, to move in silence, and rise without apology. And don't stop here. The next video will forge the next layer of your armor. Watch it. It's more important than you think. I'll see you there.